Stacy, welcome back to the Body Pod in person.
Hi.
So excited to have you here and to be doing this today. So I wanted to touch on the three main questions that we get every single day. So I'm sure your email is flooded, as is mine, and our DMs and in our groups about zone 2 training, time restricted eating, and rep ranges. So we're going to dive in deep.
Okay.
Are we ready?
Sure. Let's go.
Okay, so let's start with the zone 2 training. So I think the message has been blown out of proportion that you're saying no zone 2 ever. What is your response to that?
Zone 2 is something that you can do. I'm not anti-zone 2. I just put that out there. I'm not anti-zone 2. But when we look at time management for one, and two, where the data is coming from to show that zone 2 improves metabolic flexibility, it's based on male physiology. So I'll unpack that a bit. When we are looking at sex differences, there are sex differences that are from birth. Actually, they begin in utero. And one of those inherent sex differences are the type of muscle fibers that women and men have. So we have things called glycolytic, that's our fast twitch, and we have oxidative, which is our slow endurant type fibers. Women, by the nature of XX, because we don't have anything outside of the binary XY for men and XX for women, women, by the nature of being XX, are born with more of the endurant oxidative fibers. With that, they also have better mitochondria density. They have better mitochondrial proteins that allow for fuel to be used by the cells. And we have less of those fast twitch fibers as compared to men. So how that feeds forward to training in the everyday person is when we're looking at all the information out there about zone 2 to improve metabolic flexibility, to improve your oxidative capacity. It's based on the male data where men have to do more of that zone 2 to improve the oxidative fibers that they have. But for us, women, we already have metabolic flexibility. It's inherent because across our menstrual cycle, we're switching between a preference for carbohydrate and fat. And that's an offshoot of the exposure of estrogen and to some extent progesterone that our body has on a monthly cycle. So by the nature of saying everyone needs to do zone 2, it's a misstep for women. So I'm not saying don't do it. We can do it for our soul food. We can do it for, stress release. We can do it as a chat as we're going for a walk with our friends. But there isn't the precedence that women have to spend so much time doing zone 2. So we look at the recommendations that are coming out about zone 2 training. They're saying between 45 and 90 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week.
Oh,
right? Who has time for that?
Nobody has that time.
Right. So we look at optimizing women's health and longevity. So we're not training for anything specific. We're not training for a marathon or an Ironman or a 100-mile bike ride. That's a different kettle of fish. So if we're training for health and longevity, we want to improve women's glycolytic fibers. We lose them rapidly as we age, but the other really critical thing for longevity is being able to produce lactate. So lactate is the metabolic byproduct of fast twitch and anaerobic capacity. It's a critical fuel for the brain. The brain prefers lactate, so does the heart. If we don't produce lactate and we are amiss in how much that we are producing, then our brain metabolism changes and it relies more on glucose. When we're looking at it from a health perspective, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal because your brain is still working optimally. But when we're looking at sex differences in cognitive decline, we're looking at sex differences in Alzheimer's development, and all of this is coming out, we see that not only is it a sociocultural thing where women who are now experiencing Alzheimer's, dementia, and cognitive decline didn't have the availability of fast-paced kind of jobs that are now available. So we already have a little bit of decline in that.
Hmm.
But from a metabolic standpoint, lactate isn't happening. We're not having lactate metabolism. So we're not having the neurons connecting very well. We're not having glial cells working optimally. So it contributes to the sex difference in cognitive decline. So when we pull it back and say, what is optimal for women who are time pressed,
Hmm.
wanting to have good body composition, really good metabolic health, as well as looking after our brains. So when we're 70, 80, 90, 100 years old, we still have all of our faculties. It's looking at polarizing our training where we are putting in true high intensity work.
Hmm.
We're putting in proper strength training because that also helps with brain health. And then when we want to have our soul food, we go out and we have our soul food. But it's not the bread and butter of what we do. Women do better from an aging perspective of peppering in more high intensity and less volume. Men, on the other hand, as they get older, they need more metabolic flexibility. So, yes, they need to do the zone two. They need to improve their oxidative capacity. They need to improve their mitochondria density, which means their body's able to use free fatty acids well. But for women, we're already there by the nature of being XX. This is why I'm always like, you don't have to spend all this time doing zone two.
Okay.
If you are an endurance athlete, then yes, you do, because you need that base volume in order to be able to race 100 miles or finish a marathon. But for the general woman who's looking to optimize health and fitness and longevity, you don't have to put so much time into that zone two training.
Okay, so for example, for someone that is starting out and they've not been regularly exercising, then would it be appropriate for them to go straight into high intensity interval training, or would you phase them in?
Just like anything, like all movement is good. And so if you're just starting out, then you want to move, right? And you might hit a higher intensity because your body's not used to moving. And you might go for a walk and hit an incline. And then all of a sudden you're in a higher intensity. But over the course of a couple of weeks, that hill is going to flatten out for you. It's not going to feel hard. So we want you to just enjoy and learn how to move before we start putting in any kind of high intensity.
Hmm.
And then it could be you're going on your 20 or 30-minute walk and you deviate and do some flights of stairs on your walk, or maybe you increase your pace a bit. So there's ways of phasing in high intensity, and it's relative. And the fitter you get, the more that intensity comes into running sprints or battle ropes or kettlebell swings, the things that we talk about on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But anyone can start, just start by moving, and then you can vary your intensity in your preferred mode. And it doesn't have to be something that's really, really focused in a gym. It can be, I'm going to go up this hill and I'm going to do 30-second hill reps.
Hmm.
And it could be walking, could be running, it could be power walking, something like that. And that will get you on the road to doing and getting used to higher intensity work.
Okay, so I think this is where, and you just covered this a second ago. I think the conversation is getting muddled out there when women are feeling like there's a barrier to exercise because they think there's only one specific way to exercise. And what I hear you saying is there's different modes that do different things, but our time at this age, we want to really put in some of those high intensity intervals and those sprint intervals. But there is a phase in if you are new to exercise, and it's totally appropriate to start there and then ramp up and start peppering in some of those hit sessions before you go full throttle.
Yeah, because I don't want someone to have the experience that a lot of kids have, where kids are really active and having fun, and then they're put into like a PE class that makes them do running or makes them do something that they really don't like, and they get a really negative attitude around physical activity. When we are looking at adults who haven't been moving and they want to start their journey, we want it to be a positive reinforcement. So is it 10 minutes walking for 3 times a week at the start? That's better than nothing, right? So we look at phasing people in just like strength training. We're not going to throw someone in the gym and have them do 100-kilo deadlift or anything like that, right?
No, no, no.
We phase everyone in. So I don't want people to think that there's this barrier because they're not fit enough or they're not confident enough. We did a study back when I was at Stanford looking at pre-fitness fitness. So what are the barriers to exercise? And one of them is, well, we know lack of community, but also the uncomfortable aspect of the heat and sweating. So we did some pre-cooling, and taking away that one barrier allowed women to develop a fitness level that gave them the confidence to go out and join a class or join a gym or go out and do a hill instead. So we have to look at the barriers as well. So yeah, we can drink something cool for the heat aspect, but also if you have ownership with a friend and you both want to start out on this journey, you're not going to tell your friend, okay, do 30-second sprints,
Yeah.
right? So you want to have some of that ownership as well. It's like, what would you tell your friend if your friend is wanting to start on this journey? So you are your friend,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe you have that commonality of calling your friend up and saying, "Hey, let's meet for 10 or 15 minutes and go for a walk."
All right. So, Stacy, can you define Zone 2 training, and are there benefits to Zone 2 training?
Yeah, so when we're looking to quantify intensity and stress on the body, we look at different zones. We have zone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some people say 6, and some companies are now saying 0. And 0 has not been,
Interesting.
I know, I'm like, 0 has not been quantified in sports science, so we don't pay attention to that. Zone 2 is going out and having a conversational pace where you're still like breathing hard, your heart rate is elevated, but it's not overly taxing. You
Mm-hmm.
could do it for a very long period of time. The benefit of zone 2 is it's cardiovascular health, right? So we are increasing our heart rate. We're creating more of a muscle pump. So we're stimulating the cardiac muscle. We're improving our blood flow. Um, and of course, stress release, right? It's lower intensity. It's not too taxing on the body. We don't have a lot of cortisol that's released. So we're looking at it as a stress reliever. It's really good for improving our cardiovascular health, which then improves blood flow. For men, it improves metabolic flexibility. For women, it does use more free fatty acids because it's lower intensity, but it doesn't invoke the same metabolic flexibility that we see with men.
Okay. So I use it. I'm curious your thoughts on this. I will use it if I have a one-on-one client and they're in, a little bit of a calorie deficit that we're watching, and they just aren't recovering as well on lower calories.
Yeah.
So I'll use it as a recovery day and something that they can look forward to where they don't have to smash themselves, in that hour. And maybe instead of the choice of not working out, that they would go out for zone 2. So that would be an appropriate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there are times when like I travel a lot, right? And the transmeridian travel is a nightmare, but I want to get outside and move every day. I'm not going to go do a hit session every day. I'm not going to go smash myself in the gym every day. So there are times where I'm like, I just want to move. And it is zone 2. And I'm not necessarily training for anything, but it's movement, it's outside, it's waking me up, it's making me feel good. And yeah, there is a bit of a calorie burn, but it also works for recovery, for resetting circadian rhythm, for just allowing the body just to go, oh, okay, great. So it is a really massive stress relieving response. So it creates a cascade of hormonal responses to just allow the body to get more parasympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, it's really beneficial for recovery.
And I love, love, love our zone 2 rides that we've gone on.
I know.
To catch up. So can you describe lactate? Is that something, do we get the same benefit from strength training with the lactate that's moving in the body, or is that a separate conversation?
It depends on what kind of strength training we're doing. So when we're looking at how the body fuels itself, it's not a linear progression of ATP, CP right into fat burning. We're always kind of using everything all the time. When we get to a precedence of lactate production, it means that we are at a level of intensity where it's too hard for the body to be able to take some of the breakdown components of carbohydrate and pull it into aerobic exercise. So if we're looking at strength training and we're doing a circuit like every minute on the minute using kettlebells or something like that,
Yeah.
then we're producing lactate. If we're doing a typical heavier lifting session, that's not lactate production.
Mm-hmm.
That's ATP, CP, and We are using a little bit of glucose because we get into that, but we're not at a level where our body can't regenerate fast enough. So when we're looking at the availability of fuel, when we're looking at the higher loads, lower volume type, so you're heavier lifting, that is not lactate production. If we're looking at a circuit or we're looking at a metabolic stimulus of higher reps, so we're doing the 20 or whatever to failure, which isn't that appropriate for our group of women, that can be lactate production, but it also depends on how much rest is between the sets.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to the rep ranges. And when we launched our first power programs, I know we wrote the program together and we put it out to the world. And I know there was a lot of chatter and confusion about there's some hypertrophy blocks in there. There's max strength blocks. For the beginner, obviously, there's no low rep heavy lifting, and we have higher reps in that to really teach them how to move. But it's very confusing to women when they'll come into our programs and they'll say, well, Stacy wants me to only lift low reps, heavy weight. Why do I have higher reps in the beginning?
Yeah. There's a misconception, I think, in the fitness world where if you're going to do strength training, you can't do any cardio. If you're doing cardio, you shouldn't do strength training, especially heavy loads. If you are going to do strength training, then you should just lift heavy in a power base, and you shouldn't do hypertrophy, or you should just do hypertrophy to failure. But it's not a linear progression of things. We have to look at completely altering and changing things up as we go. So when we're looking at the higher reps and the lower loads in the beginning program, it's because we don't want injury. 2, we want people to learn how to move properly. How do you squat? What is your depth? What are your sticking points? Do we have to work on mobility? How's your core strength? Because we're not going to put you under load if you are bendy and not like a bamboo straw. Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at how the body responds to it, your body responds to load, and it doesn't matter if it's high or low load, but what kind of adaptations do we want? That's why we want to build women into lifting heavier in the power-based stuff, but not staying in that high loading and lower rep range for the rest of their life. Yeah. Right? We need to have a periodization, which is what you're so great at doing and prescribing in the programs. So we build up and then we work on our max strength, and then we have a recovery, deload. Maybe we're doing some higher reps there. Maybe we're doing some cluster sets. Maybe we're doing some ballistic movements, and then we can rebuild. Because part of it is we want that central nervous system response to actually take the place of estrogen to build the lean mass in the bone. Mm-hmm. But then we also want to have different stimulus so that the neuromuscular connections also are having a challenge instead of just always recruiting as many muscle fibers as possible.
Yes.
And I think people get confused when they're like, wait, I just want to lift heavy. Mm-hmm. First, we need to make sure your body's really stress resilient enough to take on those loads.
Yeah.
And as you're taking those loads on, we have to back it off a little so that you can become more stress resilient.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think what I love that you just said is to be able to give women the freedom to say, listen, there's no possible way that we could come up with one program that would cover everything and that would be suitable for every single female in their specific situation. So the goal really is, as we get women into strength training, and I would love to hear your point on this as well, is to come in at the level that you are comfortable doing. And yes, we want to push you. And yes, at some point we want to mix in these lower rep ranges or mid rep ranges, but it's a different purpose. If you have an injury, maybe you're not doing low reps for X amount of months while you're recovering. Or, if you're trying to work on some stability muscles that require a bit of time to stabilize, then maybe you're doing some higher reps there, but that's not where we're staying in those, 20, 30 rep ranges. Now, I just did a foundation program where I did do, 20, 25 reps, but it was once a year and it was for 3 weeks. Yeah. So it's not something that I stay in, but the fusion of the science and real life coaching is meant to be tailored, especially when you're selling online programs where we don't have this one-on-one connection with women. Our goal for everyone is to not get injured, to fall in love with strength training, and to just keep at it so that we do have this good quality of life through hopefully 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Yes, exactly. Because there's so many women. I get asked all the time, where do I start?
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable going to a gym. It's so gendered. We know this. You walk into any big brand gym, and as a woman, they're like, oh, they're the cardio machines. As a guy,
Every
you walk
time.
in, there are lifting platforms back there, and we have XYZ strength equipment.
Yeah.
So women are intimidated to go into that. So one of the goals that we have is to make it accessible. If you have a program and you can go into a gym and there's someone on the app to show you what to do and how to do things, it boosts the confidence. I've seen women in gyms on our app working out together.
I
And
love
I
it.
love it. It's great. And, so I see that it also brings in-house community
Yes.
as well as the community that we're developing online.
Yes. And Stacy, you are the pioneer in this space, and everyone will give you that title.
Oh,
So
thank
we're
you.
super grateful. If we move on from the rep ranges, and the third question that I want to really bring up in this confusion space of intermittent fasting and time restricted eating. Now, I know where you stand on the time restricted eating, but most women are getting confused on whether intermittent fasting and time restricted eating are the same thing. Are they the same thing? And what do we recommend?
They are definitely not the same thing. So we look at intermittent fasting. There's lots of different avenues to take when we're looking at intermittent fasting. We look at holding your fast till noon or after. And so you have like a 4-hour eating window. And in that 4-hour eating window, there are no real restrictions on what you're eating. We see some people are doing a 12-12, where they're 12-hour overnight fast and 12 hours of eating window. Again, no real confines around what they're eating in that 12-hour. You could have a 16-hour fast. So with intermittent fasting, there's no real identification of circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
When we're looking at time restricted eating, we're looking at fueling the body when it needs to be fueled and then having an overnight fast.
Mm-hmm.
So time restricted would be you get up and as a woman, you're having breakfast, or not full breakfast, but something to eat within like a half an hour after you wake up, to drop your cortisol, signal to the hypothalamus that there's some nutrition coming in. And then maybe you go training, then you come home, have your real breakfast, and then you're eating on regular, like you're having your meals and your snacks, and then you have dinner and you don't have anything after dinner. You stop eating with dinner being over. So it might be 6, 7, 7:30 at night. So you have around 2 hours before bed.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a 12-hour, it could even be a 14-hour fast, because you stop eating at 7:30 and maybe you don't get up, if you're lucky enough, till 9, and then you have something at 9:30. But most people can do an 11 or 12-hour fast overnight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we call time restricted eating.
Okay, so then time restricted eating is the same thing as really eating around your circadian clock.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, hallelujah that we have defined that, because that is a question I get on the daily. So when would intermittent fasting be appropriate for someone? Would you recommend it for any specific reason?
No, for men and women, no, because we look at the population research that's coming out in overweight, sedentary, obese, like lots of different studies in that, looking at early versus late breaking a fast. We see individuals who break their fast by 8:30 in the morning, and then they stop eating around 4 or 5 in the afternoon, get the benefits of what we think about with intermittent fasting. They have more metabolic control, more blood glucose control, which comes in the metabolic control. They are improving their lean mass. They're improving neuroplasticity. We're getting more autophagy because they have that overnight fast and they're working with their circadian rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
We see people, men and women, who hold their fast till noon or after, and then they end up having a later eating window. So they might not finish eating till 7:30, 8:30 at night.
Oh, I'm already in bed.
Yeah. But there is no change. There's no metabolic change. There's no increase in autophagy. There is an increase in cortisol. Baseline cortisol goes up because it's a stress. It's an incredible stress on the body to wake up and try to go through the day without fuel. Because if you're thinking about, okay, I finished eating at 8 p.m. and then I'm not going to eat again until noon, that's a very, very long time for the body not to have fuel. And I put it to people, I'm like, would you take your car out on the motorway on E and try to see how far you can get before you get to a or petrol gas station? There are some people who say, yeah, I'd do that. I do that all the time. But most people won't do that because they know what's going to happen to the car. It's just going to, and they're going to be stuck. So we have to think about our bodies, right? But it's not only about, so many people focus on calories. They don't think about nutrient density.
Yeah.
So when you are choosing in your eating window, you want it to be nutrient dense. So that's looking exactly at removing ultra processed, taking care of your gut microbiome, eating lots of lean proteins, doing the 80-20 rule, right? If you need a calorie deficit, well, that's when you are really conscious on what you're eating for dinner. Maybe you have 150 calorie deficit at dinner, and then that feeds forward to a calorie deficit and improves your parasympathetic responses overnight. The other thing about your circadian rhythm is we have hormone pulses throughout the day that is reliant on light and food. So if we're not eating, then we're offshooting our hormone pulses. So this means our appetite hormones are skewed, our testosterone or estrogen, they're skewed, our luteinizing hormone pulse is skewed. So we're creating a lot of dysfunction in the body. So when we're looking at that population research, they're going, okay, well, part of this is because there's a misstep in hormonal control that is supposed to be part of our normal wake up and sleep cycle. Food and light are the two most powerful ways of resetting your circadian rhythm. So if you're holding a fast and then you're just eating in the afternoon, you're shifting as if you're doing a night shift.
Yeah.
And we see the literature out there, how bad night shift has an impact on overall health and well-being.
Bless the night shift workers.
I know.
I feel so, we love them. So, okay, the questions then that would come up. What if I'm fasting for religious reasons?
It's a small amount of time that you're fasting, right? We look at Ramadan, we look at other religions that have a fasting protocol in it. And it's a very short period of time. Ramadan's a month, but you're still eating.
Yeah.
Right? And you're eating not with circadian rhythm, but it is an offshoot of being able to fuel the body. Like I have athletes who follow Ramadan and we are able to manipulate the fasting window and eating window with their training so they're not compromising their training. I think that becomes the confusion of, well, you say no fasted training. Correct. Maybe we move your training so it falls into your eating window when you're doing something like Ramadan.
So you're really fueling for the demand of the training session.
Yeah.
And I think this conversation comes in when we look at the protein amount that women need to get. And we know that women coming in new to this high protein amount, it's overwhelming. So when we shorten that eating window with, say, intermittent fasting, it makes it really hard to protect that lean mass and get in the number, like the grams of protein that we're recommending to them in a day when you're only eating in a 4-hour window.
Yeah, I had this conversation with Abby Smith Ryan, who's been on the podcast. Good
Love
friend.
her.
I know she's awesome. And she's like, well, when we look at it from a scientific point of view, we're reducing the eating opportunities for women who already have a difficult time getting enough food in.
Yes.
Because of the sociocultural confines of the diet culture. And a lot of women will fall into something like intermittent fasting because of the diet culture and the want to kind of fall into an ideal body composition that they think they need to have. But they're fighting that. Like if you're not fueling your body, you're not going to create any kind of change. So we look at eating opportunities. When you're restricting it down to that 4 or 6 hours, like you said, you're really restricting your body's ability to get optimal nutrition. So you might be trying to achieve a particular body composition, but you're compromising your actual nutrition. You're looking at micronutrient deficiency. You're looking at protein deficiency. For women who are trying to increase their fiber intake, they might eat a lot of fiber and not be full enough to fulfill their calorie needs. So there's a lot of misconception that happens with the eating windows because women are way more sensitive to low nutrient intake than men's bodies. And that also isn't really discussed when we're talking about intermittent fasting and where we're putting our calories.
All right, so let's move on to jump training because that's getting a lot of popularity right now. And I know people will ask us, is there jump training in your programs? How does that contribute to our bone mass and our bone health? And what is your recommendation around jump training?
So there's two ways of thinking about jump training. We can think about our ballistic plyometric type movements where we're taught to land to absorb impact in our muscle. Right? With soft knees or really trying to absorb it through our posture and not having a hard landing. That can have some benefit for bone. But when we're talking about jump training for bone, we need to relearn how that jump is. We're landing hard. We're absorbing the impact through our skeletal system. So it's not a high jump. It's not a ballistic type movement. And the reason for that is we want multi-directional stress through the bone. And remembering that the body will morph with the movement, the ground doesn't. So we have ground reaction forces. We want a low jump, but a high ground reaction force to create multi-directional stress within the bone to improve bone density. So when we're looking at jump training, any kind of jumping is great. Yeah. If you're skipping rope, you're doing box jumps, that is going to contribute to bone health. If you're someone who's on the low end of bone density, so you're not osteoporotic, you might be just on the cusp of the old word osteopenic, but just low normal bone density. You want to look at how am I going to increase that ground reactive force. So, I mean, I've talked about Tracy Clissold's app, and it's now available, Osteo Gains, and it's 10 minutes 3 times a week of the proper kind of jump for improving bone density. For women out there like, well, I thought just any kind of jumping was good. Yes, keep doing it. Any kind of jumping is good for the bones, just like resistance training is good for the bones. But if you are in the category where you really, really need to focus on building bone density, we have to look at what kind of landing that we're doing to improve that ground reaction and multi-directional stress in the bone.
Okay, final question here. I know we had talked about this in our power program last month on one of our calls, where we brought up a female that had asked, I see these lean women in the gym and they're all doing cardio. And so can we talk about, I know no one likes calling it skinny fat. I think the proper term is normal weight obesity. But that's what it means. Most women will know it as skinny fat. Can you describe, if that's new to someone listening, can you describe what that is and how we go about fixing that?
Yeah, so sarcopenia is the highly technical word for it, which skinny fat, normal weight obesity, all of those. It's when we're looking at the quality of the muscle. We're seeing a lot of extra fat where the muscle should be. So we look lean, but we have a really high percent body fat because we don't have as much lean mass, muscle mass, and we have lower density in our bones. And when we're looking at women who are so cardio driven, because that's from the 1980s and 90s mentality that's been so thrown at us, we're looking at a high stress catabolic state when we're doing all of the cardio. Catabolism means we're breaking down our lean mass. So when I see women who are really lean and they're just doing cardio, I think about, okay, low bone density, bones like chalk, and really low muscle quality. How do we change that? Of course, strength training.
Yeah.
Right. That's the be all end all for all women. Doesn't matter what age you are, but it becomes more important as you age. We need strength training across the board. So I'm really happy that conversation is changing. The other is protein intake. Yeah. So like Bill Campbell posted that study a few years ago where they took an experimental group and a control group of normal weight obese women who were all sedentary. did not put them on any kind of exercise, just changed the amount of protein that they were taking.
Yep.
So, we have the control group that maintained their usual protein intake. I think it ended up being 0.5 grams per pound of body weight. And for the experimental group, they boosted up to that 1 to 1.1 grams per pound of body weight. Over the course of 12 weeks, the people with a higher protein intake completely recomped their body. No
Unbelievable.
exercise.
Yeah.
So protein is really, really important. And that's the other conversation that's been left out of the nutrition conversation till recently, which I think is why women find putting protein in is so difficult. So we've had all these conversations about high fat, high carb, low carb. And what do we do with those macronutrients? And no one's really talked about protein.
Yeah.
So now when we're looking at the recommended daily allowance for protein, it's way too low because people don't realize that that is the bare minimum to avoid malnutrition.
Ugh.
So if you're an active woman and you're an active older woman trying to build and or maintain your lean mass, you have to boost that protein intake up to, we like that 1 gram per pound of body weight, ideally higher, but starting with that 1 gram per pound.
Well, and I mean, it comes down to, we had this conversation as well with, I think there was a study that Abby Smith Ryan introduced me to from Don Lehman's lab, maybe, about women older than 60 or individuals over than 60 maybe needing a little bit more protein than women that might be in their 30s.
Yep. And we look at that also with post-exercise, right? So we see that there's an anabolic resistance to protein and exercise as you get older. For women, it starts around 40. For men, it's mid-50s. So we do know that there's a definite change in the trajectory of aging for women versus men.
Yeah.
So we need to get that higher protein intake. When we're in our 20s and 30s, we can look at 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight. So it's around that 0.8 gram per pound. And that's a good enough. But as we get older, we need to boost it because we have to provide optimal protein, especially for women who are hitting perimenopause, because there's a rapid signal to lose lean mass and bone mass. Protein helps reduce that offshoot of losing lean mass and bone. And it also helps with cravings. I get a lot of questions of, why am I craving sugar and carbohydrates so much? Like, I'm putting weight on and all I can do is think about food, especially carbohydrate food. It's called the protein leverage theory, where we look at the degradation of lean mass and bone in women who are perimenopausal and the high stress of cortisol from being in a hormone shift. And the brain is perceiving it as being tired. And when the brain is tired, it wants glucose, which makes you crave carbohydrate. But in actuality, you need more protein.
Yeah.
So when women boost their protein intake to that 1.1 or so grams per pound, their cravings stop. Because now their body's getting optimal amount of amino acids to offset that rapid decrease in lean mass and bone, and also helps shut down some of that cortisol stress from being sympathetically driven in this hormone shift.
So another conversation then to really have here for someone that might come, I'm anticipating the questions, this seems overwhelming to get this amount. Would you step load them
Absolutely
a little bit and say, you know what, if that doesn't work for you and you can get in 100 grams instead of 120, if that is your quality of life and you are eating much more than you were, do what you can and then build up from there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we look at little hacks of how do we increase our protein intake, right?
Yes, share some.
So most women will get up and have a hot drink, usually coffee.
Yeah.
So that's why I talk about protein coffee. It can't be hot because if you stir protein powder into a hot beverage, it glugs and is gross. But if we're looking at stirring protein powder into your cold milk of choice and then adding your coffee and putting it in the fridge overnight, you have a cold latte in the morning. You drink it, you get your latte fix and 30 grams of protein. So you're starting the day. This is just water, but down there.
Oh, right. We already had that one.
And then other women are like, well, I'm too full. What do I do? It's like, well, you can split your breakfast, right? So if you're looking at having eggs, scrambled eggs on sprouted grain toast and you might have some nuts or something with it, and you're looking at having a 40-gram protein meal, you can split it before and after training. Because then you're able to fuel your training. You're able to have access to 40 grams of protein, but you don't get overly full.
Mm,
So
brilliant.
there's lots of ways of looking at what we're doing. It's the education component that comes with it.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say through all of these questions is there aren't specific absolutes. There's always a different situation that someone might fall into. And the purpose here, again, as we close out this wonderful podcast, move, do something that you love, add in these strong components of protein, high intensity interval training, heavy strength training, but the heavy strength training, there's different ways that you can do that that's appropriate for different women. And really just use these principles to improve the quality of your life so that we are independent and we are living our best life independently and through decades to come.
Correct. I love it because it's not a training block. We're not in a short-term training block for an event that's 6 months away. We're looking at how are we doing daily changes to be more powerful and strong and independent as we age.
Training for life.
Training for life.
Stacy, you're the original OG. Do you have a 5-year plan? What does the next 5 years look like for you?
I don't have a 5-year plan. I never have a 5-year plan for a few reasons. One, it's too difficult to plan that far in advance. But two, science is always evolving. Like it's not a hard and fast rule. Science changes, and I'm going to tell people how the science changes. So say 3 years from now, we find out that high intensity works for women who are 50 plus, but not for women who are younger than 49. I'm going to tell people about that. So then I too would change what I was doing. Right? So things are always moving and changing. And I want to be able to keep up and be able to disseminate that as it comes. And in my own life, things move and change so rapidly that it's too hard to have a 5-year plan.
You might be on another continent.
I know.
So Stace, what would you tell your younger self if you could go back?
It's not an epiphany. It's not that exciting. I would tell my younger self just to keep doing what she's doing, keep pushing, keep asking why. Even in the really darkest parts of my life, I still had that asking why and feeling if something was unjust to keep fighting for equality. And I wouldn't want that to change because I've had so many doors that have been shut, but also doors that have opened. And I'm now at a point where I tell my PhD students, even my own daughter, I've even told this to my mom, I've lived my life where if an opportunity comes up, I look at it and I'll take it because I don't want to fall backwards. Where I can always go back to where I was, but it's really hard to move forward without taking a challenge and a chance. And that's been part of my ethos ever since I was young.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't want to go back and disrupt any of that. I might give guidance and say, you're going to get through this, but I wouldn't actually go back and tell my younger self to change anything. But I would definitely give more words of encouragement to allow my younger self to know that you're not really in this alone. It's just the voices haven't come out to support yet.
Keep fighting.
Keep fighting.
Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving us a 5-star review and sharing the Body Pod with your friends.
Until next time.